Steph. Are there any discussions happening here with the Secretary General or within the UN about what happens in Gaza once the violence and fighting stops?
Of course, we're all, the Secretary General and people around him are thinking about what the day after would look like. I think he's already spoken about the general vision as seen from his part, but it is obviously something we're thinking about.
And what sort of UN contingency planning is being done for that? Are there plans being made for a possible, peacekeeping force? Should the Council come to you with requests for that?
Look, I'm not aware of any discussions about a UN peacekeeping force.
And then this afternoon, the Security Council is going to vote on a draft resolution that calls for humanitarian pauses and corridors for a sufficient number of days to allow aid access. Is this helpful?
I mean,
if it passes?
This process has taken some time, so let me wait and see what happens in the Council. Stefano, then Ibtisam, then Benno.
No, my question was about the Security Council resolution. I just want to add that there was any contact with who drafted the resolution with the Secretary General on ideas on what this resolution should have?
The Security Council members are masters of their procedures and their words, and we're always available to speak to them. Ibtisam.
Steph, a follow-up on the issue of what you call the general vision, and if I'm not mistaken, regarding what will happen after the war.
The general vision?
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
And I assume you're referring to the interview that Mr. Guterres gave to CNN when he spoke about it.
Yeah, and he spoke about it to Reuters. He spoke about it twice publicly. But go ahead. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So, but my question is, from what he said, actually, it seems to be that he thinks that everyone should have a saying except for the Palestinians in Gaza itself. Why is that?
No, that's not at all what he said. He said, obviously, this would have to be discussed with the Palestinians. I think he said that very clearly.
But we didn't hear about the fact that the Palestinians in Gaza should decide who is the one who's going to rule them and not people from the outside.
There's a bedrock principle of people being able to choose their elected government. Benno, then Murad.
Thank you. I'm interested in the nature of the deal about the fuel delivery. Was it just that Israel approved that one single truck, or is it like a wider agreement that could pave the way for more deliveries?
We hope it could pave the way to more deliveries, but not only more, but more. Not only more in terms of days, but most importantly, more in terms of volume. And the limits put on it are make it even more challenging, right? So I think I would encourage you to speak to our colleagues at UNRWA on that. But it is clear that we just need more fuel in terms of volume on a regular basis to run the energy plants in our health facilities, to have fresh water for the bakeries, to have trucks to not only deliver but to move solid waste around, to deliver aid. It's our lifeline. Murad.
Thank you. On Gaza too, it's very clear now after 40 days of the war in Gaza that just calling for humanitarian ceasefire will not end these massacres that committing by Israel in daily basis. When the SCG will call to end the war in Gaza?
He is calling for humanitarian ceasefire, and he wants to see an end to the current conflict. Yes, sir.
Thank
And
you,
then
Steve.
Evelyn, sorry.
Majdi Gazici with Sky News Arabia. I want to go back to the kids with cancer and blood disorders in Gaza. The last update that we had, that 12 kids were evacuated. We've heard some new reports about some more kids that have been evacuated, I believe, to Turkey. Can you have like an update for us? What's the
I will
estimate?
try to find. I will try to find.
Thank you.
We're reliant on our colleagues at WHO, and I know a lot of time they want to ensure that the operation is over before speaking about it. Evelyn?
Thank you, Stefan. Additional reports from Israelis have emerged documenting rape in the October 7th Hamas attack. Is rape considered a war crime? And if so, who at the United Nations would weigh in? Or is it just the ICC?
I mean, rape is a crime, full stop. There will need to be accountability for all of the atrocities committed. Joe, and then we'll come back to the room.
Okay, thank you. I actually have two questions relating to what Martin Griffiths has been saying. The first is, he wrote on X, quote, "The protection of newborns, patients, medical staff, and all civilians must override all other concerns. Hospitals are not battlegrounds." And you've made similar statement today in terms of there not being areas for combat. But according to both Israeli and U.S. intelligence, Hamas has been using hospitals in Gaza for their military purposes for some time. If this is true, the hospitals are already battlegrounds. So again, if true, isn't it reasonable to expect that the hospital should still be off limits to the IDF? That's my first question.
Well, the answer is what I've said and what Martin has said, is that hospitals should not be battlegrounds, full stop. So I don't.
However,
I'm just saying
there's a-
hospitals should not be battlegrounds.
but
Right?
they are.
Parties should not be
according to,
should not be fighting in a hospital. Hospitals should not be battlegrounds anywhere in the world. Full stop.
Okay.
What is your
follow
next
up on
question,
that.
Joe? Yeah, go ahead.
I have to follow up on that because that doesn't really answer the question. If one side is using it and as a military basis and not abiding by what international law requires, doesn't the other side then have a right
Joe,
to
I'm
respond?
not going to get into a legal argument with you. I'm using what I'm saying is based on international humanitarian law and based on humanity, right? Hospitals should not be battlegrounds.
All right. My second question is, again, this is from Mr. Griffith's statement yesterday or today. He says, allow the UN, other humanitarian organizations, and public and private sector entities access to fuel in sufficient quantities to deliver aid and provide basic services. So I'm wondering if the reference to public entities would necessarily include Hamas, which is the de facto governing authority in Gaza.
He is calling for humanitarian organizations to have access to fuel, and also for the private sector to also restart.
No, but again,
Joe, I'm not going to elaborate further. He also, Joe, he gave a very extensive stakeout, and they put out the transcript. And he answered some of these questions, and I would encourage you to read the full transcript of his stakeout.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jordan, and then I'll come back to the room gladly.
Thank you, Steve. The OCHA flash report number 39 issued last night stated that there are 182 Palestinians, including 46 children, were killed in West Bank and East Jerusalem. And I'm just wondering, this is about the peacekeeping mission, UNTSO. They are located actually in Jerusalem, and they have 380 personnel, at least 100 military observer. those military observers, like they go on the street of Jerusalem, are they allowed? And if you can, when you have a chance, give us the latest report they submitted to the United Nations on their
Well,
work.
I would encourage you to look on the interweb and look at the UNSO webpage. You will see the detail of their mandate, which is very clear in terms of what they do, why they were created, and how they report back. I think everything they do is fairly transparent.
It's not there. This is why I'm asking.
Well, we will help.
This is
We
my
will help.
second
We
time in
will
1
help.
month
We
to
will
ask
help
you
you
the same
find it,
question.
Jordan. Okay. Let's go to two people who have yet to ask questions. We'll go Yvonne, and then okay, go.
Sorry.
Apparently, I've lost all authority yet again. Go ahead.
Can you give us any more information on the negotiations around Kerem Shalom? What have there been conversations with the UN and the Israelis prior to these more public calls?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the discussions we are having with with the Israelis, with the Egyptians, and of course with the support of the U.S.
But had Israelis said no previously?
Well, I mean, if
what
they'd
did they
said if we'd gotten green light, we would be using it. Let me put it that way. Yvonne.
Thanks. Michelle asked you about the Security Council meeting this afternoon. You didn't give a comment, really. But for those of us who may have to have to file copy ahead of the vote,
Yeah.
I mean, the Secretary General must have some expectations
I mean,
from this afternoon
the
session.
expectation is unity. The expectation is for the Security Council to speak with one voice in support of our efforts I mean, you have documented the struggles of the Security Council, right? On this particular issue, unity of purpose of the Security Council is central to the work of the United Nations. Michelle, then Murad, then the winner.
I know you were asked about this yesterday, but today is the day, and the U.S. president is meeting with the Chinese president in San Francisco. Is the Secretary General sort of watching to see what happens with this meeting? How important does he believe this meeting is to the world? What's his sort of assessment?
It is very important. Let's be honest, and I think Secretary General has spoken quite often and quite eloquently about the risk of the great fracture, and it is a sustained and deep dialogue between the world's two largest economies, who have a preeminent role in so much of our lives, is necessary. We very much hope that there will be it will be a positive meeting, especially on issues relating to climate and technology, and of course they have all sorts of other bilateral issues they need to deal with.
For our readers, could you just explain the great fracture?
It sounds such a 1950s expression for your readers. Yes, exactly. It is what the risk the Secretary General of having two economies that are not interlinked, two internets that are not interlinked. We need global dialogue. We need a global interlinked economy. We need to have common vision on technology, on artificial intelligence, on climate. I hope your readers are satisfied. Murad. And
Thank you. Mr. Martin Griffiths said in his statement that the carnage in Gaza should not to be allowed to continue. Do you think calling for just humanitarian ceasefire is enough to stop this carnage?
Look, and we've said this in many different contexts, when we've called for a stop to the violence, the stop of civilians being killed. We are not the ones with our fingers on the trigger, right? The Secretary General's strength, in a sense, is his voice, and he will continue to use it in that direction. Maggie.
Back to today's vote, the language in the draft resolution calls for a sufficient number of days for a pause for humanitarians, no specific number. What would be the minimum that UN humanitarians need to do something effective?
I've been here long enough not to interject hours prior to a vote in the Security Council.
Okay, then back to, I'm not letting you off the hook just yet. Back to the hospital question, I think that Joe was trying to ask. Should credible evidence be found of Hamas weapons or command center under al-Shifa, would that remove its protection would that remove it being a protected site under international humanitarian law?
I'm not going to. There are some basic tenets of international humanitarian law which we've echoed. I'm not going to get into the what ifs. I would encourage you to look at what the ICRC has put out because they are the guardians of the Geneva Conventions. I frankly have read it. There's a great post on Twitter from their legal counsel, and I've actually learned a lot from it, but I'm not going to get into the details of the what-ifs. Ibtisam, then Yvonne.
On the issue of humanitarian ceasefire and not calling for the end of war, could you explain to us what do you exactly mean when you say humanitarian ceasefire? Do you have specific days in mind? Do you have what is the difference
for
between
us? A humanitarian ceasefire is a ceasefire with a humanitarian objective, right? You could use other words in front of ceasefire. We are looking for one with a humanitarian objective to which parties to a conflict should be able to agree to because it is with a humanitarian goal in mind, and right now it is our priority.
And does that include stopping the hostilities full stop? Like
It involves ceasing fire.
for how long?
Well, it needs to be again, I don't want my answer to bleed into Maggie's effort to drag me into a Security Council debate, so I will hold my voice for now, but obviously it would need to be for a sustained amount of time. Let me, okay, Caitlin, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I asked you this, I think, last week or the week before, and I think this is an important, like, isn't it the UN's role to say how many days would be practical for humanitarian work? I mean, President Biden has said more than 3 days. The ICRC has said at least 5.
Yeah, I mean, it would need, as I said, it would need to be prolonged for us to. It needs to be long enough for us to be able to mobilize the resources once we have enough fuel for people to get what they need. I'm not going to get into.
Is there a timeline for the UN to propose some kind of
I would encourage you
framework?
to read through Martin's full transcript on that. I think that may answer some of your questions. Yvonne, would you like to speak now?
Yes, if you don't mind. My question is on the great fracture that you just spoke about.
Yeah.
You said that the Secretary General does not want to see two internets, but as you know, the Chinese internet is isolated from the rest of the world. Would he like to see the opening up of the Chinese internet and the tearing down of the so-called Great Firewall?
I think the Secretary General has always argued for a free and open internet wherever. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My question is about another war. In Ukraine, Russian troops are reportedly using chemical weapons against Ukrainian forces in two hotspots on the front line. According to media reports, this involves the use of banned chloropicrin. Do you have any comment on that?
No, I had not seen. I will look into those reports, but of course we stand against any use of chemical weapons anywhere. Stefano then Abdelhamid, then I will leave you.
Yes, it's a follow-up on the question if those hospitals are used as a military base or quarters by Hamas. UN has a lot of personnel in Gaza at the moment, so UN must have information. Why UN doesn't say clearly if
There's no, as far as I know, there is no UN staff, there's no UNRWA staff in the hospital.
And so the UN doesn't know, there is no intelligence information by the UN.
Do we have intelligence?
I think so.
I'll
Should
move
have.
on. Abdelhamid.
Oh, thank you, Stefan. I have two questions. First, there are two Israeli senior officials who spoke about eviction of Palestinians altogether and throwing them into Europe or Canada. Danny Danon and Smotrich. They both wrote articles or spoke out about eviction of Palestinians, which that proves that there is a plan to evict all Palestinians, another Nakba. Do you have any comment on their statements?
I mean, Abdelhamid, we've spoken about this before. We, of course, stand against the forced expulsion of Palestinians. That is clear. That's been our position since the beginning. So it is not. It is, of course, something that we stand firmly against. Your second question.
My second question about the storming of a Shifa hospital. And I noticed that you tried to avoid using the word condemnation. So invading a hospital, it doesn't really necessitate the term condemnation. But also the Israelis went down the basement and they found the storage of medical supplies and they destroyed it. So if they have evidence that Hamas is using this hospital, do you think they will wait until now not to show it to the world, the way they did with Ramtisi Hospital?
Abdelhamid, I understand your emotions, but it's obviously a question I'm not able to answer. Thank you. Monica, please. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. We'll start today with 3 notes for you. Some of you called me yesterday or sent me some messages about the informal briefing that the General Assembly will hold on Friday. So I have more details for you, and as soon as the briefing finishes, I will send you also some links. So President Denis Francis has convened the informal plenary meeting of the General Assembly on the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. In a letter to member states, the PGA informs that the meeting will take place on Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the GA Hall. The request for the informal briefing was made by the permanent representative of the State of Libya, His Excellency Mr. Taher El Soni, and His Excellency Mr. Sidi Mohamed Lardaf, permanent representative of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, in their respective capacities as chair of the Arab Group and chair of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Group. President Francis will deliver opening remarks. We will inform you in due time who will brief from UN agencies who are operating in the Gaza Strip and other principals. Member states are invited to take the floor after the briefers finish speaking. The delegations will be invited to speak from their seats. Delegations speaking on behalf of groups can be given priority. Speakers will have time limits for individual statements of 3 minutes, and statements made on behalf of groups can last up to 5 minutes. President Francis has launched an interactive resource on his PGA 78 website to connect directly with the public. Ask PGA is a channel where anyone can ask Mr. Francis a question
which will be replied to within the time frame of 24 hours. The President of the General Assembly welcomes questions from member states, media, and the public at large. So ask PGA on the PGA's website. And tomorrow at 10 a.m., the General Assembly will hold a plenary meeting on the question of equitable representation and on increase in the membership of the Security Council and other matters related to the Security Council, item 121. The debate will continue in the afternoon at 3 p.m. during the plenary meeting as the second item in the agenda. And last month, President Francis appointed a group, as you may remember, of co-facilitators and co-chairs for various intergovernmental processes during the current session. For intergovernmental negotiations, IGN, the President appointed His Excellency Mr. Alexander Marshik, Permanent Representative of Austria, and His Excellency Mr. Tarek M.A.M. Al-Banai, Permanent Representative of Kuwait. And for our information, tomorrow there won't be a briefing here, so I won't be here. You will receive updates from us, but we'll be back on Friday. And before we go, I have to say hello. I think she has been here for 6 months now, right? But I have to say hello to this current session, to Anadia Situna. She's from Al Jazeera English, and she's here in the front row. So welcome again. That's everything I have for today. So you have, how are you? How are you today?
Good. Well, quick question. The Friday GA session, is that a resumption of the emergency special session or just a separate meeting?
It's a separate meeting. It's an informal briefing, so no resolution is expected. So member states will hear about the situation in the Gaza Strip. And they will, of course, be there for the briefing. Yes. How are you, Murad?
Good, thank you, Monica. Thank you. Does the PGA support these calls from around the world to end the war in Gaza?
Well, since the 7th of September, the PGA was very clear that he asked for a cessation of hostilities, right? The PGA has been asking for all parties to stop the violence and to return to dialogue, because he firmly believes that only the dialogue and diplomacy and a conversation and mutual understanding will be the key element here in order to stop the suffering. There are too many people suffering, Murad, and we are seeing the pictures every day, the stories. It's time for us now to really implement the resolution of the General Assembly, which was adopted in October, end of last month, right? And the PJ firmly believes that he firmly supports the implementation of this document, and he firmly believes that the dialogue is the way. I just would like to read for you the first calling on this resolution. Calls for an immediate, durable, and sustained humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities. So the PJ said that on the 7th of September. He said, cessation of hostilities, release of all hostages, and also the delivery of much-needed aid for the people in the Gaza Strip who are now suffering as we speak. Thank you. Anything else? So if not, I would say thank you so much.
I have a question, Monica.
Okay.
I have a question too.
Hamid. Okay. Go ahead, Hamid.
Yes, Monica, thank you. Yeah, the PGA issued a strong statement after October 7th.
Sure.
He condemned Hamas, straightforward, very strong language. However, I didn't see any statement from him condemning killing 11,000 civilians, including 4,500 children, and in addition to all those atrocities committed day in and day out. I haven't seen a strong statement from him to condemn what Israel is doing in Gaza now. Why is that?
Thank you so much, Hamid, for your question. And, you and I think we spoke about that before, as you said, and I brought you, I think it was a tweet and a statement from the PJ on the day before. But, if you go back in time, I mean, you are absolutely right. He's issued a statement on the 9th of October, and he kept issuing statements condemning the violence on the 10th of October, on the 12th, on the 16th, 17th. I'm giving you only some examples. On the 20th of October, 23rd of October, and his message hasn't changed. He has been asking, and he's very consistent about that, for the cessation of violence, for the stop of human suffering.
No, my question is
and
not
no,
that.
just if I
Question is.
just if I just
My question
finish
is about
my train of thought.
condemnation of killing. I'm sorry.
Hamid, no.
Just answer my question.
No.
if you can.
Hamid, I think I answered a question in other occasions, and I'm happy to answer a question today. The PJ is very consistent. He's asking for the cessation of violence and for the end of the human suffering. And human suffering has no nationality. People are suffering. Human beings are suffering. And I think that's the most important point here. And this is for all the parties, not for one party or the other party, for all the parties to get back to the negotiation table and to speak and to realize peace. But thank you for your question. And as usual, I ask you to take care. But I see other hands. Please, go ahead.
I have a question.
This is
That's
Joe.
fine, I have a question.
Okay,
It's a very
go ahead.
simple one. Yeah, it's a very simple one. Is the Friday informal meeting open to the public? Or
Sure.
at least to the press?
Absolutely. The informal briefing will be webcast. You can see online, or, of course, if you are here in the building, it is open. Absolutely. Okay. I see another hand. Not sure if it's an old hand or a current hands. I just can't read because my glasses don't get that far. So if not, I would say thank you so much. I see you on Friday. Okay? Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Of their little boys and girls, and the other is giving them something to sell in markets. This is yet another example of how a little bit of support goes a long, long way.
What I'm about to say is not new. Water is one of the biggest sources of life. Everyone needs it. Imagine living in a world with no access to clean water. For millions of people, including children, this is the reality. Every day, 1,000 children die because of unsafe water and sanitation. This is because they don't have a choice and do not have access to proper sanitation and hygiene facilities. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery spread through water, and they can kill children. Millions of children are also missing out on their education. 3 out of 10 schools in the world don't have access to safe water and sanitation. Students in these schools are then more likely to fall ill, miss class, and drop out. Menstruating students also cannot manage their periods in a healthy and dignified way. In areas of conflict, children are 20 times more likely to die from diseases linked to unsafe water and sanitation than from violence, because wars wipe out water and sanitation infrastructure, leading to disease and death. Continued droughts, floods, conflicts, and famine, often worsened by climate change, are increasing water insecurity for millions. The main fact is this: no one stands to suffer more than children. UNICEF works in over 100 countries to help provide access to clean water and reliable sanitation, including in emergency situations such as the recent earthquakes in Syria and Turkey. But we need more water action from our governments. To all the world leaders at the UN Water Conference, the clock is ticking and the world is at a tipping point. You must make sure children are the center of all water agendas and must increase action and investment in water, sanitation, and hygiene. Access to clean water is not a privilege, it's a right, and children deserve no less. For them, it is a matter of life and death.
we say that water is life. Water is life. Without water, we cannot survive.
For animals and people.
Very good. In fact,
we are very lucky because the distance is just about 50 meters to the water point. It saves time when it comes to the classes. In our areas, it's very dry and it's very hot. So we allow pupils to access to water after 30 minutes. Instead of going home, it saves the time of them being at school.
Then they say there is no water here on earth. What will happen? What will happen to these plants, the trees we are seeing outside there? What will happen to them?
Kama hakuna
I'm in Gore's town, where more than 100,000 refugees have arrived in the space of less than a week. People are arriving after spending long hours on the road and are exhausted, uncertain of their future, having fled from their homes, and with no clear idea of when they may be able to return. UNHCR has been on the ground since the earliest days of the emergency, supporting the government in providing immediately needed assistance. Trucks have arrived with bedding, with foldable beds, mattresses, and other urgently needed items. We know this is only the beginning of this emergency and that more support will be needed. Please give generously.
È triplicato il numero delle persone che scompaiono o muoiono nel percorrere la pericolosa rotta nel Mediterraneo. Sono 990 le persone che hanno perso la vita da giugno a settembre rispetto ai 334 dello scorso anno. Mi trovo qui con la Guardia Costiera che svolge attività di ricerca e di salvataggio nei confronti delle tante persone che si trovano in difficoltà nel mare. È fondamentale il meccanismo coordinato di ricerca e soccorso, ma non solo. Occorre garantire vie legali e sicure alternative all'attraversamento in mare. Quello che vedete alle mie spalle è l'hotspot di Lampedusa, dove le persone vengono temporaneamente ospitate per poi essere trasferite in altri centri di accoglienza. Proprio qui ho incontrato Mohamed, un ragazzo del Gambia che ha perso il papà e la mamma e che è arrivato qui a Lampedusa in cerca di sicurezza con un grande sogno, quello di andare a scuola. Attraverso il progetto Protect, l'UNICEF e i suoi partner garantiscono ai minori presenti nell'hotspot informative e tutto il supporto essenziale di cui hanno bisogno.
The RTSS malaria vaccine could save tens of thousands of lives each year if rolled out broadly. Because of that, it is one of the most impactful vaccines for children, particularly those in Africa, where in 2021 nearly 500,000 children died from this life-threatening disease. The RTSS malaria vaccine is also the first vaccine recommended by WHO to tackle malaria. It has taken over 35 years of research, development and testing to reach this point. The vaccine was launched in 2019 through a series of pilot introductions in Ghana, Kenya and Malawi, where to date approximately 1.5 million children have been reached with at least one dose. UNICEF is leading the procurement and supply of RTSS and future malaria vaccines. In 2022, we awarded a contract for the first ever supply of the vaccine, securing access to 18 million doses from 2023 through 2025. We work on increasing access to more malaria vaccines as they become available to protect children most at risk. Vaccines work. They save lives.
8月6日の朝、真っ青いね、雲一つない青空の下で、ね、ずーっと地響きがして、みんなが両手で目と耳を塞いで、怖かったよね、やっぱりね。
I was born and raised in Hiroshima. Hiroshima is the first city to experience the atomic bombing and reconstructed from that suffering. The atomic bomb survivors are aging year by year, and we are the last generation.